Sama สัม Swaha Greetings everybody, my name is Brian and I will be the MC for today. Welcome to the series Compassion in Action and Non-Violence in Buddhism. Today's series is sparked by the war between Ukraine and Russia, which has been going on for months. Usually our audience are from Malaysia, but I can see some friends from overseas. So let's interact a little bit and do share where you're from in the comment section below. Just now I've seen somebody from Singapore, right? Oh, wait, yeah, some people from Malaysia, definitely, yes. Malaysia, okay, cool. Okay. Oh, someone from Taiwan. Okay, welcome. Thailand as well. Welcome to the session. Okay. So, before I proceed further, let me first introduce myself. I'm Brian, or you can call me Pasada. I'm 19 years old this year, and I'm currently studying Foundation in Arts in Sunway College, Malaysia. I'm also an active member of Putra Heights Buddhist Society Youth, Buddhist Society of Sunway College, and a committee member of BUDDY, which stands for Banda Utama Dhamma Duta Youth. Today's talk is the second and final talk of the series entitled Buddhist Approaches to Social Reconciliation and Healing. We are very blessed to invite Ajahn Kalyano, the Abbot of Buddha Bodhivana Monastery, Melbourne, Australia. Ajahn was born in the UK and got interested in Buddhism when he was in high school after watching the documentaries The Mindful Way and The Buddha Comes to Success, which tells the story of Luang Por Chah. Ajahn Kalyano loves meditating during his university years and came to Thailand in 1983. In 1985, Ajahn entered the Bhikkhu Sangha at Wat Nong Papong, which was established by Luang Por Ajahn Chah. Ajahn came to Australia in 2001 and has since been teaching the Buddha Dhamma in Australia for more than 20 years. Okay. Yesterday's talk was given by Venerable Tan Ajahn Jayasaro, entitled Use of Force, Violence for the Sake of Peace. Good title. Do check back the recording on YBAM's Facebook page and YouTube channel if you have missed yesterday's talk. Let me quote the Dhammapada verse number 5. Hatred never ceases through hatred. True love alone they cease. This is an eternal law. Beautiful quote right here. Today, we are very blessed to have Tan Ajahn Kalyano to share with us on more perspective on this topic. But just before we go into the talk, let me put forward some housekeeping rules. First of all, do switch off your mic throughout the session. If you have any questions, do remember to type your questions below in the chat room or in any channels that you are watching live right now. We will put your questions together and I will help to ask your question on behalf during the Q&A session at the end. Before we proceed, let us put our palms together and pay respect to Tan Ajahn Jayasaro. Okay, so Tan Ajahn Jayasaro, you may proceed. Ajahn, could you hear me? Hello? Ajahn, are you there? Ajahn, hello. Technical team.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings, good afternoon to you all. I think the title of today's talk is Buddhist Approaches to Reconciliation and Healing. It's probably been stimulated by people's worries, concerns about the news, about wars, particularly the war in Europe between Ukraine and Russia. But really, these things are nothing new in the world. But we're fortunate that the Buddha came to be in the world 2,500 years ago and gave us some very good teachings on how to deal with conflict. To avoid conflict would be the best, but if conflict has happened, how to resolve conflict and move on. And his teachings were applicable in those days just as they are this day. So disputes, conflicts, wars, disputes between individuals, groups of individuals, and then the need for peace, reconciliation is nothing new. They were happening before the Buddha came along, and they've been happening since the Buddha came along. But for those who have little dust in their eyes, who are fortunate to have come in contact with the Buddhist teachings, at least we have a whole collection of teachings and practices to help us deal with these things. And one thing that, the Buddhist approach to healing, reconciliation, it starts with each individual, recognizing that we have a responsibility for our own actions in this world. And if we're experiencing conflict and suffering in our own lives, well, the starting place is to recognize what's going on in your own mind, in your own life, your own actions, your own world, you could say. But that doesn't mean to say to neglect the wider picture of what's going on elsewhere in the world or with other people, but to recognize that we can't do much to help the rest of the world until we've sorted out ourselves or understood ourselves better. So these are the two aspects of, you might say, Buddhist teachings. Buddhist approach to practice is learning about yourself, how to look after and understand yourself better, and then using that, what you've learned and the peace and compassion and wisdom and understanding that you develop through your own practice, using that to help those around us. So reconciliation implies that there must be two things, or maybe two different sides, or maybe more than two different sides that are opposed. So obviously in a war, you have different sides that are fighting, but you can have a dispute between two people. So it could be husband and wife, two work colleagues, or an employer and an employee. Could be two friends, could be two siblings, two students, two neighbors. Once you've got two people, there's the possibility of misunderstandings and conflict. You don't necessarily need to have two countries fighting, just two people together. If they're not in harmony already, you'll start to have conflict, and then there'll be a need for reconciliation and resolution. So why do we fall into conflicts? Because we don't recognize the truth of the way things are. And the Buddha's offering to the world, he offered that, because of all our internal personal sufferings and problems in life, as much as the greater sufferings and problems of the world, the origin, the cause of it all is ignorance. And this word we use in Buddhism, avijja, ignorance of the truth, misunderstanding of the truth, lack of knowledge of truth, leads us into all kinds of mistaken views and thoughts and misunderstandings of ourselves and then the world around us, and leads us to have all kinds of false expectations, high expectations, wrong expectations of how life should be, how the world should be. So maybe just in this era, this period, one of your expectations maybe that is challenged at this moment, that's bringing you suffering, is the world should be peaceful. We shouldn't have wars anymore. I know I think that sometimes. Wars, you tend to think of as something from the past, like world wars and ancient wars. Why are there still wars in the world? It's so, it's time for the world to wake up and not fight anymore. Surely we can do without wars. They're a thing of the past. And yet here we are. They're here. And this is the way things are. So why do we have disputes? Well, it's coming from ignorance, not recognizing the harm we're doing to ourselves and others when we fall into disputes. And then before we know it, maybe harming each other to the point even of killing each other. But at some point, these conditions change, don't they? Even wars have a beginning, they have an end. And that's one thing you can learn from, if you do, feel like wars are a thing of the past, that shouldn't be happening now. Well, you can learn at least from the wars of the past. And one thing you can see in common is that every war has a beginning, has an end. And this is one of the basic teachings that the Buddha gave us, is to reflect on the impermanent, changing nature of this world. Whether it's just a thought in a human mind to fight someone, to go into a dispute, a conflict, or physical, violent action with someone else, or a war between nations or groups of people, conflict, whether it's civil war or war between two countries. Wars have a beginning, wars have an end. And there have been many wars in the world's history, and they've all ended one way or another. And then with the ending, there's a chance for reconciliation, for peace. So you might say there's two kinds of peace in the world. There's the peace of not having gone to war in the first place. So like most of the world at the moment is not at the war. So even though your airwaves and your news channels are full of news about conflict, say in Ukraine, actually the majority of the world is not at war at the moment. So that's one kind of peace, the peace of not having gone to war or not going to war. But unfortunately, sometimes countries do fall into their unskillful actions and end up fighting. But then those wars come to an end, and there will be a peace that comes after the war, because that's what we learn from impermanence. There's a beginning, there's an end. Before the war, there's peace, and then after war, there's peace. And that's what we have to focus on, isn't it? How to get back to that peace, how to get back to the good conditions that we have when there are peaceful relations between people. Just as when there's peaceful and a peaceful experience in our own mind, when that's disturbed and we get angry or we start suffering in some way, we have to learn how to get back to that. So just as the world has had wars, but then managed to find peace, through peace treaties, reconciliation processes, And you might say people just getting fed up with the suffering of killing and destruction. So they're ready for peace. So it could be from those 2 world wars or all the different smaller conflicts that have happened. Sooner or later peace comes because people just can't fight anymore. I mean, sometimes it's one group manages to conquer another, but still peace will come when people stop fighting and they go back to realizing that peace is the best way to live for human beings. And that also applies for ourselves. If you're a Buddhist practitioner, you're probably used to quite a few struggles in your own mind. Struggles between, you might say, good and evil, the skillful, the unskillful. Sometimes we get angry and then we recognize the suffering we've fallen into and we forgive ourselves. We accept whatever's happened that led up to that angry mood, angry experience, and then we let go and we return to peace. Venerable. Okay, sorry, there was a disconnection there. So in our own lives, our own individual lives, we've also had many inner turmoils, inner conflicts that we've witnessed. They've arisen, they passed away. And that really is where we have to start understanding what the nature of peace and then disturbance, the opposite of peace, is from our own mind. We've all been angry before. We've all been afraid before. We've all been caught into desires and obsessions and attachments for things that we haven't got before. But those experiences have arisen and passed away, haven't they? They're impermanent in their nature. So whenever we start to reflect on this, develop some mindfulness and self-reflection, we can start to see the impermanent or transient nature of this world from the inside, from our own mind. And that's where you can maybe get an appreciation more for peace. So if you've been struggling in your mind with a period of discontent, anger, jealousy, dissatisfaction, one reflection you can bring up at that time is ask yourself, how long does this last? How long will this last? What's feeding it and what will bring it to an end? Because you've seen it arise and pass away in the past. You've been angry before, you've been suffering before in one way or another. You've seen it in the past, you know it arose, it passed away before. The next time you're falling into a similar state of suffering, you could ask yourself at that time, bring up the mindfulness and ask yourself, how long is this going to last? How long do I need to keep feeding this and holding on to this kind of suffering? Can I let it pass? Can I let it be? And this is an insight you can get into your own mind and the way that conflict and suffering arises in your own mind by establishing, the opposite of ignorance. It's awareness and understanding. And then you can use that for dealing and looking at the world as a whole and for encouraging others to do the same. When we're caught into conflict, in one of the problems is at that time, that's all we can see. When, say, you have anger arise in a situation, at that moment you tend to be not mindful, not reflective. So that's all you see, all you know at that time. And so you tend to hold on and identify with that mood and keep it going. So the heart of Buddhist practice tends to be to come back to develop mindfulness and awareness and self-reflection, to question that, find skillful ways to do that, practice bringing up mindfulness every day. So the beginning of our practice is learning to develop this quality we call mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment, getting to know yourself, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, becoming aware of your conduct, your speech, your actions, and then looking at cause and effect and what's leading to what. So if you're suffering, there'll be causes for that. At the moment you're suffering, quite often you miss it, don't you? You're not seeing cause and effect at work. You're just stuck in the suffering. So what's the strategy? What's the plan? Well, number one is always to bring up some kind of improved level of awareness. If you've been practicing any kind of mindfulness technique, reflecting on your conduct from day to day, your speech, your actions, and then developing mindfulness through meditation, that's where you go, isn't it? When you're caught into suffering, whether it's anger, conflict, disappointment, frustration, whatever, bringing your mind back to the present moment, recognizing what's going on and accepting what's going on. Of course, when we're suffering, nobody likes it. We don't like suffering. And so one of the tendencies of the ignorant mind, when we're not fully aware, is to look for somebody to blame or something to blame, usually looking outside of ourselves at causes and conditions. And that's often where conflicts begin. Not recognizing that the experience of suffering is an internal experience that we have we're experiencing for ourselves. And that doesn't mean to say other people are not involved in the world around us, maybe bringing us suffering as well, of course. But the actual experience of anger, fear, worry, anxiety, all the kind of component parts of what we call suffering, they're experiences that we have as human beings in our own mind. And that's where reconciliation healing has to begin, doesn't it? Reconciling with whatever is causing that suffering, healing it, rather than just going out to blame something external and then maybe seek to punish or fight or get back at, seek revenge on whatever that external thing is, whether it's a person, a group of people, or something very kind of abstract like a government or a place or something. So the Buddha encouraged us to develop mindfulness every day as a basis for practice. Developing mindfulness using meditation objects such as recollection of the Buddha, mindfulness of breathing, recollection of the thought of loving kindness, for example. To bring attention up, to pay more attention to ourselves, to get used to looking and knowing ourselves in the present moment. Because when you're mindful, you're aware of your body and mind as it is right here, right now. And this gives us a chance to develop clarity. And if we are suffering, or we're caught into internal sufferings and conflicts, or if we're caught into external conflict, you're always going to have a chance to remedy that by becoming aware of what's going on. As long as we're caught in the trains of thought and the concept and the ideals that our mind throws up, and we're not able to reflect on them with much clarity or understanding, then as long as that's happening, there's not much chance of any kind of reconciliation or peace. So the real place for beginning the process of reconciliation and healing starts within our own mind. Maybe even just recognizing that there's a problem, that there's some suffering there, because sometimes we don't even recognize that. We don't know we're suffering. When we're angry, we don't realize we're angry. One of the things the Buddha gave us to reflect on to help become more mindful, more aware, is he encouraged us just to consider the basic condition of being a human being. So as a human being, we're born into the world, and that's something that's the same for every single human being, wherever they are in the world. We are subject to aging. Once we're born, everybody gets older. day by day, second by second. Everybody gets sick in one way or another, sooner or later, ill or injured, aches and pains, or just the sickness that comes with aging of the body. And everybody has to face death. You will definitely die. It's the one thing you know about life, is that you will die at some point. I will die, you will die, everyone in this world dies. If you really become mindful and aware of those simple truths, basic truths that the Buddha encouraged us to reflect on every day, what does that do to your mind? Well, my experience is it brings a great sense of humility, a recognition of the frailty of the physical body, but also of the mind that inhabits the body, because the mind can't stop that happening, can it? Your mind, however smart you are, however much you know, however clever you are, however much power you wield, whoever you are, whatever you are, you can't stop the fact that every day you're getting older, you'll get sick, and one day you must die. So when you reflect on that, it humbles you, doesn't it? Takes your ego, your sense of self or conceit down a peg. That's very useful for us, because that's often the beginning of mindfulness, when you're starting to see the way things are, rather than being caught into your own views and opinions about how the world should be, how your world should be, how you should be, and how the world around us should be, and how other people should be. It's just bringing your mind in line with truth. It's that every day I'm getting older, I'm getting sick, I must die. I can't stop that or control that very much. You can do a little bit to ease the pain and reduce the sickness by treatments, of course, but ultimately we can't stop that. So if you become really mindful of that, it brings your mind to a place of clarity, doesn't it? You say, oh, this life I lead is imperfect. This world is imperfect because I am definitely getting older and going to die one day. And I can't stop that. And the next reflection you might have once you're becoming mindful of this truth is that other people are in exactly the same boat as you. Is there anyone in this world who doesn't get older, get sick and die every day? No. Everybody is heading in the same direction. We're all facing the same challenge, the same difficulty. So one thing you learn in practice of what the Buddha taught is that wisdom and compassion kind of are much the same thing, two sides of the same mind. So the wisdom of becoming mindfully aware and clear that you are getting older, subject to sickness, one day you will die, naturally leads on to the arising of compassion and understanding that other people are exactly the same in that respect. It's a universal truth, isn't it? There's no living being, even animals, insects, whoever, any living being is subject to aging, sickness and death in this world. So as you consider that, even just, sitting here listening to me, maybe just take a pause and take a few moments to consider that. Then the next thought is, we're all in the same boat. We've probably got more in common than we realize. Because when we get caught into division, we divide with others over views and opinions, over wealth, money, property, land, power, politics, ideals. We don't see these truths, do we? We get caught into the divisions and the differences, and that's what leads to conflict. But when we pause, pay attention to the way things are, it starts to become more obvious. Oh, they're getting old, I'm getting old. They get sick, I get sick. They're going to die, I'm going to die. Without us having to raise a finger. If you really have insight into the impermanent nature of your own body, the desire, the wish to hurt or harm somebody else or punish someone else starts to fade away, doesn't it? Because you realize they're already suffering. They're already going towards the end of their life, whatever I do. So it's your pride, your ego, your conceit, these qualities that might lead you into conflict with others start to fade. May not be all at once, but the clearer the insight, the quicker they fade. And this sense of universality, universal compassion, kindness arises in their stead. And this is one offering that the Buddha gave to the world, is that the human mind can reach a point where it experiences what we call universal loving kindness, universal compassion, universal altruistic joy, universal equanimity, which is a very positive quality. It's not meaning indifference. These four qualities can be experienced by human beings, not just the Buddha, but people who have practiced the Buddhist path over the centuries have got to the point where they've experienced what we call universal compassion and kindness. That means unconditional, without limits, without missing anyone out, recognizing that there are things we all have in common, reducing our own attachment to self and ego and bringing up that sense of, or that mind state, mental state of compassion directed to all living beings. This is possible because people have already proven it. Men, women, young, old, the Buddha and the disciples of the Buddha to this day have proven it over and over again. And one of the causes for that is recognizing that we're all in the same boat. The nature of this world is impermanent. It's subject to suffering because it's imperfect. It can't give us perfect happiness. And it's not self. It's a conditioned realm. As human beings, we're conditioned in that we were born, we go through our life, and then we die. And there's no person who can stop that or control that. If one really sees that brings up this state of compassion, doesn't it? You recognize that other people are the same as you. And immediately the very attachments and clinging that would lead to conflict with others start to diminish when you recognize that. That's something you have to cultivate. You have to cultivate the qualities that will lead to that kind of awareness. Developing the mindfulness, developing the insight, knowledge, the vicca as opposed to avicca, which is ignorance, which conditions more greed, anger, delusion, more conflict, more suffering. Vicca, knowledge, comes from clarity, from developing the mind to reflect on things, to see truly the way things are without bias and without hiding from the truths, even the difficult truths. And I'm not saying it's easy, is it? It's not easy to accept the fact that everybody is subject to aging, sickness, and death. It's the last thing anyone wants. No one wants to get old. No one wants to get sick. No one wants to die. Of course, our natural craving that brought us into the world in the first place as human beings doesn't like that, doesn't want that. But the whole point of the Buddha's teaching and is to remind us and get us to look for ourselves and see that you don't get everything you want in life. You do get aging, you do get sickness, you do get death. And that's everybody across the board, and no one is immune. If you're ever in a conflict with someone, just bringing up that simple reflection might be enough to help diffuse that conflict or maybe stop you getting into conflict in the first place. As monks, it doesn't mean to say you're living together as monks in monasteries in the Buddhist world, we don't ever have differences of opinion and conflicts. But one thing that comes out, if you ever start to disagree with someone or move towards a conflict, you start to realize, what's the point of arguing, fighting over this? We're all going to get old, sick, and die anyway. Why add to the problems of our life? That's wisdom, isn't it? When you really see that, it puts things in perspective. And these other things that people argue and fight over, whether it's Buddhist monks or lay people in the world, governments, individuals, what do we argue and fight over anyway? Reputation. We go to court over our reputation, defend it, attack someone else's money, land, property. And, we start off in courts and arguments and disputes, and then maybe end up going violent when it's on the level of war. But what is it that people fight over anyway? When you're already subject to aging, sickness, and death, these other things that we fight over fade into nothing, don't they? You're fighting over a bit of land, say, the border of your country. I want this bit of land. I want more land so I can have more security and more resources and more people and more this, more that. Yeah, a bit of land. What's the point of spilling blood over land, which doesn't know anything? It's just land, isn't it? It's just earth and rocks and trees and things. Same with water. Why spill our blood and kill each other over water? Blood and body is more important. Your body is your vehicle for doing good, for achieving peace and happiness in this life. Why damage that in the pursuit of something less? Money, reputation, power, security, all these things. I'm not saying they're totally unimportant, but they're not as important as life, are they? Life is more important. So this is one of the themes that the Buddha that flows through the Buddhist teachings, to recognize that the things we fight over are really not that important, not worth it. And we really don't need to fight because we're all going to die anyway. We're getting older, get sick and die anyway. Why spoil it by harming each other in the first place? So the best way of, resolving conflict and healing is actually avoid it in the first place. You avoid going to war, avoid fighting, avoid arguing if you can, because we're all in the same position. We all fear suffering. Nobody likes suffering, and we all want to be happy. We all want to be healthy. Nobody wants to suffer. So why add to the suffering by arguing and fighting over things? But of course, having said that, we do forget ourselves. Ignorance is always slipping into our thinking and our decision-making and our activities as humans. So that's why we do have conflicts. We forget the truth. So in the first place, try to avoid the conflict by becoming more mindful, recognizing what we have in common with the other people. It doesn't mean to say you have to love and like everything about them. They may have a different taste in things and different wants and desires, but at least recognize those people also want to be peaceful and happy, and the conflict is only going to damage ourselves and others. If you can recognize that before you even get into the conflict, or as you're getting into the conflict, then you might stop. That's the first thing, isn't it? Then you can apply the same wisdom if the conflict has already occurred. If people have fallen into their wrong views and made the mistake of going to war or fighting or arguing or suing each other or whatever it is, whatever the dispute has come up, if it's happened already, well, your aim is to get back to that same point where people can see the common humanity between them. If you're dealing with a post-dispute, post-war, post-dispute, then you need to apply these teachings now to the moving on so that people can get back to peace. But it still comes from the same insight, isn't it? This world is impermanent. We're all subject to aging, sickness, and death. We all want to live in peace. We all hate suffering. Bringing up this sense of recognition that we're all in the same place and ultimately have the same desires, and trying to get people to see see the benefits of peace and good conditions for getting on with our lives so that people can move on. So after a conflict, you want to get people to start looking at each other in a new way and see that because we all have things in common, it's time to let go of the past. And that's not always easy, of course, because people remember. But holding on to the past, if it's post-conflict, holding on to the past with anger, going over, blaming, punishing over and over again for the past actions is not going to bring reconciliation and healing, isn't it? It's only going to prolong the war. It's like maybe just adding a bit more to the war afterwards. It's like when people have that desire to have the last word in an argument. You have the last word and you keep the argument going, start it again. Maybe it flares up again. That's not reconciliation, getting back to peace. You really want to see the value of true peace where you're setting aside the past, letting it go so you can move on. It's not easy. Of course, it requires much effort and attention and patience on many people's parts. Skills in speech and negotiation and talking to and doing what we can to get back to this point where everyone sees the value of peace. But one thing that will help is recognizing there's no point carrying along the past. And this is where forgiveness, reconciliation comes in, recognizing the need to set aside the past, put it aside so that you can move on and find peace again. Because if you've had peace in the past, you can achieve it again. You use that to your advantage, that knowledge. So many countries in the world currently are at peace, so they can use that. If they ever fall into war again, we hope they don't. If they do, they have to go back and remember we were at peace before. We've had it before, and remember the advantages of peace, that you can go about your business without worrying about bombs dropping on you and bullets flying through the air and so on. If you can aspire to get back to that, having remembered it before, then you see the value of letting go of what's happened, putting it aside. Even though terrible things happen in war, in conflicts, even just in arguments, we say very nasty, horrible things. If you really want to reconcile and get back to peace, then you have to put it aside, don't you? You have to be able to set it down. Recognize there's no point carrying the past, all the bad things of the past around us as like, a heavy bag full of suffering that you're carrying on your shoulders. We have to really learn to put that bag down for our own benefit and the benefit of others. In the monasteries, we have this saying, when you have a dispute between two monks or two groups of monks and they really can't agree and they keep going back over the past, he said this, he said that, the way humans do when we carry the past around. We have this phrase, we say, covering over with grass. It's actually a method the Buddha gave, possibly from the times that he lived in, simple times. So humans, when they had disputes, sometimes they would cover them over the grass, meaning, a dispute or a conflict or a war is a horrible thing. It's bad. And so they compared it to dung, poo, something that's smelly, dirty, that nobody wants. So all our accumulated anger and frustration and regret and guilt and hatred based on past events, especially after a war or some horrible dispute, that's still going to be sitting in the mind, and to go back over it over and over again, trying to apportion blame, punish people over and over again after such a terrible thing as a war or a big dispute. It doesn't end it, does it? It just keeps dragging on. And it's like you keep bringing up the excrement, keep smelling it, keep having it in your mind, and it sours the relations between people. You don't get reconciliation, do you? So you have to find a way to end it. So you cover excrement over with grass. And that's literally what you do sometimes in the forest. Monks, sometimes we're camping, we're in the forest, you go to the toilet and then you just cover it over with grass or leaves. And sometimes that's what you have to do. And it doesn't mean to say wrongs haven't been done. Things have been done. Things have been said. People have died, maybe. But if you keep dragging it up and going over it over and over again, it's just like you've always got the smell of excrement with you in your mind, in your heart, and then other people have it in their hearts, and everybody is worse off. What's the worst thing in your house? Or a smelly toilet that's a blocked toilet smells out the whole house, and you can't live after a while if you don't fix it. It's like our minds. If we're holding on to grudges, seeking revenge, seeking to punish others for past wrongs, say after a war or after conflict, we have to recognize the need to set that aside. And if we can't do it by talking about things that have happened and repairing the damage in that way, then we cover over with grass and move on. Once you're covered with grass, you move on, you walk away, you leave it, and eventually the grass and the excrement forms compost. That's what compost is, isn't it? It's a mixture of vegetation and manure and poo, and then it gradually becomes compost, and then you can even use it for your garden and put it on trees and things. That's what we have to do with conflict. After the conflict, we have to find skillful ways to cover over with grass. Let bygones be bygones. Accept what's happened may have been terrible, tragic, horrible, but move on as quickly and as well as we can. Because we all have the same problem. We all are facing old age, sickness and death, and we all want to live in peace and not suffer. And after a while, we're still facing old age, sickness and death, and how to come to terms with the basic sufferings of life. A mind that is still caught in ignorance, greed, anger, delusion, mental suffering, stress, and so on. Just because the war's finished, that hasn't finished. So that's obviously a deeper problem that we have to address. The war is like an obstacle that got in the way. It's like something that we threw up just to make life harder for ourselves. If you can recognize that, then you quickly want peace, because there's a deeper issue at hand. The basic issue of pacifying this mind and coming to terms with the deeper reality of existence is even in a peaceful state. Say where I am is peaceful. I hope where you're sitting, you're in a peaceful place with no war. You still have to deal with a human mind, don't you? You have to deal with a mind that gets greedy, angry, deluded. You have to deal with the problems of earning a living and then getting old and living with other people and then sickness. And then ultimately you've got to face the fact that one day you will die. Those problems are still there before the war, during the war, after the war. So really the war is just, if you can see it in this way, it becomes totally unnecessary. It doesn't improve or help anything because you're still facing the same basic problems. Might as well save all the suffering and not have the war or the dispute or the fight and just focus on the real problem of understanding the nature of existence, living as a human being in this world, dealing with aging, sickness and death. And that's what the Buddha's message was. That's the real problem of the world, not all fighting over land and security and resources and political ideas and all the things that people dispute and fight about. They're really distractions. They really they're not the core problem of being a human being living in the world. But we forget, because of ignorance, avijja is like Mara, it's like this little guy who comes in just to muck everything up and make life harder when it's already hard enough. Before there's a war, life is hard. During the war, life is even harder. After the war, life is hard. So why make a war and a dispute? You're only adding to the problems. But nevertheless, after a war, we have to reconcile. So we have to all see the value of peace, get back to that true vision of reality and see, we're all in the same position as human beings, whatever country, ethnic group, religious background, political background you're from. You still have these same basic problems to deal with. You still have an unruly, untamed mind, greed, anger, and delusion are still running wild that need to be sorted out. You have attachment to this body, and this body is getting old, getting sick, heading towards death every day. That's the real problem. That's the real thing to understand and get beyond. And the war was just, suffering that we created unnecessarily, making life harder for everyone. So the Buddhist teachings encourage us, obviously, to prevent conflicts in the first place. If you're in a conflict, to end it as peacefully and quickly as possible. And if it has come to an end, then to work hard at reconciliation, getting your mind back to the state where you can see other people as the same as you. Bringing up some of that unconditional kindness and compassion so that you can move on, and you have to let go of the past. And it doesn't mean to say we cut off memories. We still remember the past. Say if you're coming out of a war or conflict, you remember the past. But that memory is something you learn from and use it as knowledge to make you more careful not to fall into the same problem again. So, why has, Europe had so many years of peace? It's because they realized how bad war was in the Second World War. But of course, still people forget, and we do go back to war again, but so far not on the scale of a world war. But when you come out of a war, you have to really work hard not to go back into it again. So you have to see the value of peace and get people to see that we all benefit when there are peaceful conditions. When people cooperate, we all benefit. And this is one of the ways the Buddha taught the monks. So saying when monks fall into dispute, the idea is to get everybody to see that we're all happier and better off when we cooperate. Doesn't mean to say we all necessarily like and love each other, but if we can cooperate with each other in a peaceful way, we can all benefit, we can all move on, we can all grow in our lives and in our practice. And that's what we're aiming for. And we have to forgive. We have to forgive ourselves, because it's very hard to forgive other people if we can't forgive ourselves. But we also have to forgive others, and particularly after a war or dispute, because there will be things that have been done, we've done or others have done, that may be quite terrible after a war, of course. But, it's the worst tragedies that happen in human existence tend to be wars. So much destruction, loss of life. Well, we have to be able to move on by forgiving and letting go, however bad it is. And that's our goal. That's what we're moving towards as quickly as possible. So the Buddha said we can learn from ourselves by understanding our own position in life. As a human being, we don't want to suffer. We want to heal our own mind by developing clarity, letting go of the causes of suffering, greed, anger, delusion, developing the path, mindfulness, wisdom, compassion, and then encouraging that in others and in the way we relate to others. And if others are not getting the point yet, well, we have to be patient. And we have to develop equanimity. Sometimes you can influence other people and help them. Sometimes you can't. I've been meditating for peace in Ukraine, Russia for the last few months since the war started. It still hasn't ended, so I accept I haven't achieved that. I wouldn't expect to. One person can't do it. But if everyone does their little bit, well, you never know. It could have some effect. Certainly around the edges, maybe get people to quieten down and see reason and maybe come to a peaceful, negotiated settlement. That's all we can do, isn't it? You start from yourself, you work outwards, and you have to be very patient and accept that the world is an imperfect place. People's minds are imperfect, just as my mind is imperfect, and I sometimes lose my mindfulness, get angry, hold on to a grudge. Other people do that. But as you recognize that as the cause of suffering, then your own wisdom and compassion comes up for yourself. And then for other people, you see the same, and you give them the chance to grow and to let go of their own anger and develop the better qualities that the human mind can do. When there's fighting and war, you're not giving anyone a chance anymore. You're just fighting, and it's just distraction. And before things are sorted, a lot of suffering takes place. But if you're aiming for peace, then you're willing to accept people for the way they are, even their mistakes. You're willing to accept yourself, accept others, and then giving people a chance. We need to do that. That's what a peace negotiation is. You give people a chance to make peace, to develop some understanding, to get back to cooperation again by putting your arms down, your weapons down. It starts with speech as well. The Buddha used to say, before a war, people will be arguing. They'll use their words like daggers. So it starts with verbalization. Next comes physical action. So if we all want peace and reconciliation, we've got to start through our speech, skillful speech, encouraging people to be more calm, more reflective, to seek non-violent means to resolve their differences, to learn to be more cooperative with each other. And then there's a chance people will put down their arms, put down their weapons. So the guidelines are there, the principles are there, and as Buddhists, we do our best to encourage them through our own actions, in our own life, and then encourage others as well. But we really have to start with ourselves, because often it's very easy to look at others and say, oh, they shouldn't fight, they shouldn't do this, they're wrong. But you also have to come back and look at yourself, don't you? Do you still have anger and rage in your own mind? Do you still sometimes lose your temper? Do you still sometimes seek revenge on other people? If we haven't fixed our own minds yet, then we can't rush to fix other people's minds and other people's lives too. We're not going to be too good at that, are we? We have to come back and start with ourselves first. And if we find how to bring our own mind to peace, reconcile with our own imperfections and mistakes, then we've got a chance to maybe share something with others. So maybe I've been talking for quite a while now. Maybe I'll leave the talk there, and if there's a chance, we can have.
It's Q&A session now. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Tan Ajahn Kalyano. First of all, apologies just now. I accidentally pronounced your name wrongly. And thank you everyone for reminding me about the mistake just now. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. So let's go into the Q&A session now, shall we? Okay. So just to remind everybody here, do remember to put in your questions if you have any down below the comment section, or if you're in Zoom, the chat box, so that we are able to provide your questions to Ajahn. So the first question we have here is that I have seen a saying that problems do not exist. Can we say that it is desire that creates our problems? Ajahn?
Can you just read that one more time, just slowly and clearly?
Yeah, sure. I have seen a saying that problems do not exist. Can we say that it is desire that creates our problems?
Did you get that? Still not sure what the first bit is. I've seen what? A stain or what?
Before we continue, am I clear, or what's the...
Well, just speak very slowly and clearly.
All right. I have seen a saying that problems do not exist. can we say that it is desire that creates our problems?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you could say unskillful desire, what the Buddha called craving. There's 3 types of craving. Craving for the objects of the senses, like nice sights, sounds, taste, smell, touch. Craving to become, so all our ambitions and desires to live and be something and make something of our life. And then desire not to become, not to have, not to experience certain things that we may be experiencing as painful, unpleasant. This is what we call craving or unskillful desire in Buddhism, and that's where our problems come from. If you manage to establish mindfulness and let go of craving in a moment, then no problems are created in that moment. So say you're sitting here, say, for example, wishing that this talk would finish. You say, I want to do something else. I wish this talk would finish. You're creating a problem at that moment by the negative desire. I want to do something else and I want to stop doing this. If you could establish mindfulness and just let things be, you recognize that thought, but then you let it go, well, then the problem ends and you can just sit here, and whether it carries on or it ends, you can maintain your peace of mind because you've let go of craving, for example. So that's going on all our day, isn't it? Through the day, we have desires based on our senses, desire for pleasant sense contact, get pleasant things, have pleasure, and then the desire to get rid of painful experiences. The Buddha said, if you're not sure about this, the first place to look is just look at your own body. And, if you're sitting here, one reason you might want to end this session, say, is you're sitting here and you're feeling tired. Maybe your legs hurt if you're sitting on the floor. Maybe your back hurts. Maybe you're feeling mentally tired listening. This is painful feeling arising based on your body. And then if you're not very aware, craving will arise based on that. Say, I don't want this. I want to move. I want to stop. I want to change. And then you might actually do something based on that craving. But another way is to establish mindfulness and reflect. There is a feeling there. My leg hurts, my back hurts, I feel tired. You're aware of the feeling, but you're not creating any kind of identity or attachment out of the feeling. You're just knowing the feeling in the present moment. You say, oh, it feels like this. It's unpleasant, but you're not letting craving arise because you establish mindfulness. You reflect what's going on. You pay attention and reflect what's going on. So you don't let your mind fall into craving. So you can actually still be very peaceful, even if you have pain in your leg or you feel tired. And then you keep doing that regularly through your day. Craving is going to come up less and less because you're undermining the process by which craving is conditioning your mind and being reinforced. You're undermining that or letting it go, we say. So after a while, craving is going to come up less and less because you know that feeling is just feeling, and painful feeling your leg is just that. So gradually, your craving diminishes, your problems will diminish. It may take time, but that's this is the way we practice.
Thank you, Tan Ajahn. I shall move to the next question. Dear Tan Ajahn, how do you view holy war? Many wars in human history actually resulted from religious conflicts. What is Buddhist perspective on this?
Well, obviously, the Buddha taught us not to kill. It's the first precept, whether you're a layperson or a monastic. It's the first thing you're trying to practice is non-violence. The basis, the essence of the Buddhist teachings, practicing non-violence and cultivating compassion, empathy, understanding. But as you go through your practice, you also realize people, yourself and maybe others, constantly fall into wrong views and beliefs. we inherit all kinds of wrong views and beliefs from our family, our culture, our society, and religion as well. And when we fall into wrong views, wrong beliefs, then we sometimes do things that are unskillful, including fight wars. We may say our war is a religious war or a just war or a holy war based on our belief and our view. But if we look carefully, any war is wrong in the sense it's destructive and it's creating negative karma for ourselves. It's going to bring us suffering. No one wants to suffer, so why do something that you suffer? It's going to make you suffer, and other people suffer. So it's a contradiction. There wouldn't be a Buddhist holy war if you were following the Buddhist path and following the Buddha's teachings. But because people do get caught into wrong beliefs, wrong views, misguided views, they have misguided leaders, misguided governments, misguided even holy leaders sometimes, then they might act in those ways and have what we call a religious war. And it's true, there have been lots of wars being entitled religious wars. But another way of looking at it is just the effect of greed, anger, delusion, ignorance on a human mind may lead that mind to deludedly think it's in the interest of that person to fight and kill for some reason. But it's not. You just have to keep looking back at the truth and say, karma and the results of karma is a simple law that you can see every day. And if you fight someone, you're going to get hurt back. You destroy other people's property, your property will get destroyed. In a war, everyone loses. Nobody gains anything. And it creates a lot of karma, which will come back on you, not just once, but, probably for many lifetimes. So hopefully human beings can learn their lessons, and any type of war, whether it's religious, political, or anything, it's just making life worse for yourself and others. It will bring karma back to you. Why do people have terrible things happen to them? Often it's past karma from past lives, past actions, wars and things. Even monks, monks aren't immune from this. I know quite a few monks who have recollected the past actions in past lives that come back to them and in the forms of injury and accident. So why do that? In the name of religion, politics, or anything? Why make yourself suffer? That's the delusion, isn't it? You think if you win the war, your problems are over, but they're just beginning. If you start a war, it's just the beginning of karma and the results of karma. It doesn't end there for you.
Thank you for the sharing, Ajahn. We shall move to the third question. Right. Tan Ajahn, some people commented that we need to do more than just meditating. War doesn't end while we sit in meditation hall. Tan Ajahn, what do you think of these comments? And what else can we do better as a religion to improve social harmony and peace?
Oh, yeah, the whole of the Buddhist path. And meditation is one aspect of it, but developing skillful actions, skillful speech, as well as cultivating the mind in mindfulness and wisdom. So the whole of the Buddhist path will address these problems. So, what does the Buddhist path begin with is practice of giving, sharing. If we practice more giving, more sharing, you definitely won't have wars if you're thinking of giving and sharing with people. What's the best way to placate an enemy? Give them a gift. Give them something. Help them. Say some nice words to them. That's compassion in action, isn't it? Yes. And that may be developed through meditation first, because the whole point of meditation is you're empowering your mind, developing the very skillful qualities. But then next is putting them into action. But you can begin even if you think you're not a very good meditator, anyone can practice kindness and good speech, skillful action in daily life. Anyone can do that. And we do. Human beings do it all the time. Every day you see people being kind to each other, helping each other, in different ways all over the world. So people who do know this very well, it's just sometimes they forget. So you might say when somebody goes to war, they've forgotten this. But compassion in action begins with giving and sharing, and it develops a good feeling between people. I remember one thing my mum said when she lived in the UK, and when they had the Olympics in the UK, I can't remember what year it was it 2012 anyway? They had the London Olympics, and so you get people coming from all over the world when there's the Olympics. Then they have all these volunteers. It was the same in Sydney in 2000 in Australia and any other country. You get all these volunteers. They're just volunteers, and they go out on the street, and because there's lots of tourists and athletes and people from all over the world, they don't know the locality, they don't know where they're going, they need some help, some information. People will just give them help. And that's what they're there for. They're volunteers to just help people at train stations and hotels and at stadiums and all the places that people are going to. And my mum's noticed, she said, this was such a good time because everyone was just doing these small acts of kindness for total strangers from all over the world. And it generated such a good feeling. And so she was really sad when the Olympics ended, not because she was into sport, but just because she recognized how good and how nourishing that was for society. And that you see that replicated in other countries when they have their Olympics. You get all these people just willing to help strangers, being friendly, speaking nicely, going a bit further, going out of their way for other people. So that's where Buddhist practice begins. The meditation, you might say, deepens that. So you're developing those qualities inwardly and strengthening them so they become unshakable. So obviously dana alone, sharing, giving, being kind alone can still be shaken. You know, if something goes wrong, maybe you give up or you feel disappointed. They say you're kind to somebody and you help them, but then they don't behave very well, or there's a misunderstanding, or you physically get tired helping others and you get burnt out. You know, being kind and helping others can have its limits. So then you build on it and you develop skillful conduct, what we call sila, morality, speech, action that's harmless. And then you develop your mind in these qualities so they become really strong, continuous, there all the time. So if you do the whole package, dana, sila, bhavana, or sharing, virtue, virtuous conduct, and then meditation, you do the whole package, then you'll get, unshakable wisdom and compassion, and, you'll get enlightened. And then the world will become a really good place if everyone got enlightened. But, one step at a time.
Thank you, Ajahn. Sounds like Ukraine and Russia should have to host the Olympic together to create more peace. All right, let me move to the next question. Dear Tan Ajahn, Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka and Myanmar are under hardship, while non-Buddhist countries like USA, Switzerland are not lack of essentials for daily living. How do we relate this in terms of karma? As practicing Buddhists, it is more likely to be born in Buddhist countries in future lives.
The karma is a very deep and profound thing. And so it's one of the things the Buddha said is imponderable. So there's no guarantee being born in a wealthy country or a poor country or what's going to happen next. Your karma is much more individual. And so people can be born into a very difficult life situation, but make the best of it and do very well materially or spiritually. Or they can be born into a very good situation and everything can go haywire and go wrong as well. It's a very individual thing. So you can be born in a non-Buddhist country, but then come to Buddhism, and maybe because you've seen the lack of Buddhism and what it does to people, then you really appreciate the Buddhist teachings when you come to them. So maybe sometimes being born in a non-Buddhist country can actually be really helpful to some people. Whereas being born in a Buddhist country, you might be surrounded by the teachings and get really bored with them and put off with them and look for something that's not Buddhist. And then you turn away from Buddhism, which would be a real shame. So life is a bit like that. You make the best of where you are. Just accept where you've been born. Your parents give birth to you. Always appreciate your parents, the people who've helped you and bring you up, and you make the best of your situation. And it's interesting, isn't it? The monks I know who have become enlightened, most of them were born in quite poor families. Not all, but many of them into poor families with very little education, very little financial resources. They had to struggle, maybe just to put food on the table. Their parents had to struggle for them, or they had to work from a young age. But they were able to become fully enlightened arahants. And that's something to know, isn't it? It's ultimately, if you're going to make something of your life, develop yourself as a person, it depends on all kinds of conditions, and material wealth is one good factor. If you have you're born into a society where there's a lot of material wealth, well, that's good. That's your good fortune from the past coming up, good karma. But you really have to build on that, don't you? Whether you're in a poor situation, a wealthy situation, your peaceful situation, or if you're born into a place that's at war, you do the best you can. When I was young, I went traveling in Africa, where there's quite a lot of armed conflict in different countries. And I was in Uganda when there was a civil war, and there was people shooting and killing each other. Every day we faced that. I'm not saying I did anything to help them, but what I noticed was that the average person that we met were really very pleasant people, very kind, generous people, very witty, smart people, very kind, compassionate people, good people. When I was traveling there, received a lot of kindness, even in the middle of a place that was in civil war. So if you are in a difficult situation where there's economic hardship or war or these other things, or your family is in disarray and terrible things are happening in your family or something, you just have to make the best of where you're at. And there's always a possibility to improve your situation. And this is one of the blessings of the Buddhist teachings. They can help human beings improve and learn and grow even in a difficult situation. And it's never hopeless. A situation is never hopeless. It may be difficult, of course. There are challenges in life, but if you keep practicing, we practice to rise above the difficulties and the challenges, to go beyond them, whether it's helping other people. Sometimes we just have to be very patient and wait for the opportunity, or our own practice. We have to take our opportunities and put our effort into our practice, and not, just give up and be defeated by the conditions around us. This is what you learn from reflecting on karma. There's always an opportunity to make more good karma and do more good in your life, whatever the situation is.
Let's move on to the next question. Dan Ajahn, what should we practice in order to create and develop space around arising anger or greed? Thank you.
That space around anger. Can you just say one more time slowly?
Yeah, sure, no problem. What should we practice in order to create and develop space around arising anger or greed? Thank you.
I hope I heard correctly as develop space. So then mindfulness. Pay attention, first of all, to what's going on. So if you're caught into anger or greed, you're suffering in any way, bring up the awareness, I am suffering. I am caught into anger here. I'm getting angry. I'm lusting after something. I'm greedy for something. Bring up some awareness. Pay attention. Ask yourself a question. What's happening now? How do I feel? What am I thinking? What's going on? The more we can do that, the more clarity we gain, and the more you can see that if you are following intentions of greed and thoughts of greed, or you're suffering over something, getting angry or resentful, you can recognize that you're suffering. Then you can look to let go of that state of mind. Because the more mindful you are, the quicker you'll be able to let it go. But first of all, you've got to recognize what the problem is. And half the time, we're just not mindful. We don't realize we're acting in anger, speaking in anger, thinking in anger, or acting out of greed, attachment. We're not seeing it. So then we don't see a problem. So then we're not looking for the way out of the problem. A lot of the time, we just look for distraction and or we just worry about it or compound it, make it worse. But when you start establishing mindfulness, you're bringing your mind back to the present moment. It's like the quality of just sort of witnessing the experience. So you get a little bit of detachment and you can see, oh, there's anger here. It's not good. I feel tense. I feel unpleasant. It's making me do things that I regret. Greed, it's like my mind is enslaved to a certain desire and I keep having to follow it and I'm not peaceful, I'm not at ease in myself. As you become more mindful and pay attention to these things, you notice them, you recognize them, and you recognize the qualities of greed, anger, delusion, you see the suffering. Then you really do want to let them go. And, it's a bit like fire, isn't it? If you don't know fire yet, you might touch it or touch something that's hot. Because you don't realize you're going to get burned. But as soon as you get burned, you drop it. If you can see that greed, anger, delusion, fear, worry, anxiety are burning you, you'll want to drop those mental states. And mindfulness and then the reflective ability of the mind is what will help you do that.
Thank you, Ajahn. We shall move to the next question, number 7. I am able to forgive and give metta to people who have ill will and do bad things by reflecting that I may also have done bad things in my previous lives. Is this right view?
Yeah, that's the kind of compassion, isn't it? In the sense that you're understanding that others are the same as you. They do things that are evil, unskillful, harmful. You've also done those things. When you become mindful of that, then some of your conceit, your ego shrinks down, doesn't it? Because you realize, oh, I also have these stupid, foolish, unwise qualities in me. I shouldn't be so judgmental of them. I should be more understanding of them. Just as I can also forgive myself, I should forgive them. We learn to accept these qualities, these mistakes, but then move on, let go. And to let go means you stop being angry with yourself or others for the mistakes you made, but you recognize them, learn from them, and then try and move on, and obviously not repeat them. So seeing things in other people, that may be the first thing you do is come back and say, well, do I still have anger? Do I still have greed? Am I still selfish? Rather than just judging them, blaming them, wanting to punish them, get back at them, come back to yourself. Can I free myself from these qualities? And that's how we practice.
Right. Now we shall move to the last question. Is blessings helpful in stopping a war or conflict? I noted that many Buddhist teachers involved in giving blessings or dedication of merits. Are these a skillful cause to stop a conflict? Anything that I need to take note when doing blessings or transference of merits?
Yeah, I would say sharing merit and giving blessings and receiving blessings is a good preventative of conflict. And probably where there are conflicts in the world, one thing they haven't been doing prior to that is this sharing of merit. If you are comfortable with the idea of karma and rebirth and the Buddhist cosmology, that there are beings in other realms, there are many beings in other realms that are suffering. And there's karma that we've made in the past lives. We've hurt others have hurt us. one of the ways to bring a peace, bring an end to that kind of hostility of the cycle of revenge and punishment from past lives to this life is by sharing merit, dedicating merit, as well as practicing forgiveness, but recognizing there may be beings in the past that we have hurt and sharing merit with them and dedicating merit to any beings that are suffering in other realms that we can't see, ghost realms and so on. The more we do that, I would recommend that as a regular practice that will have an effect in our own life. It may affect wars in other parts of the world. That's maybe too much to expect, but in our own life, conflicts and things may be resolved better if we're practicing dedicating merit, sharing merit regularly. When we get caught into our own problems and suffering, we forget other people. We forget that there are people who have helped us who may have died now, and maybe people we've harmed in the past that have gone now, but we just tend to forget, don't we? But sometimes it's appropriate to make merit for the dead, to help them, to recognize there are beings who have died, reborn in other realms that we can't see, share and dedicate merit to them, wishing them to be well, to move on, to attain a good rebirth. That may have a very subtle but important effect in our lives and the lives of people around us. So if more people do that, it may prevent conflicts in the future. And then, of course, if conflict has happened already, then you can do it again after the conflict's finished. Well, again, sharing merit for all the people who have died in conflict, for their consciousness, that wherever they are, may they be free from the suffering. If they've died in a conflict, they may well have died with a very unhappy state of mind. So we share merit with them for their future rebirth in a good place. So before and after the conflict, we can do this. In Buddhist countries, they understand this very well. So, I've been involved in ceremonies where we make merit for the dead from wars, past wars and conflicts. I've been involved in that. And it's difficult because you can't see what's going on. So, you can't really be sure. Does it really work? Is it worth it? If you trust in the teachers who have good meditation, clear vision in their meditation of beings in other realms, they tend to encourage it and say, yes, it can help you not only spread metta to the living, of course, and compassion for the living, but also dedicate merit to the dead. And it can help to prevent conflicts or heal after the conflict.
Thank you, Ta Anjan, for all the answers. Unfortunately, the session is about to end. So those questions that we've answered, hope everyone loves Ajahn answers. To those questions who are unanswered, that's all right. There's always a next time. Ajahn, do you mind if you would like to do a sharing of merits and blessings? Could you do that?
Okay, that's a very good way to end. So I'll chant a traditional blessing from a Buddhist monk. While I'm chanting, maybe all you listening can dedicate the merits of listening to the Dhamma and talking about the Dhamma today. Dedicate them to not only your relatives, but to all beings, and particularly all the beings, all the people who have died in the conflict in Ukraine at the moment. It's probably thousands and thousands of people died, both soldiers and civilians. So we'll dedicate the merits of this talk and practicing Dhamma today to them. May they all attain peace and a good rebirth. Yathavarivaha pura paripurenti sakarang evameva itotinang betanang upakapati ichitam batitang dumhang kipameva samichatu sape purentu sankapa จันโทปนราโสยถามณีโชติราโสยถาสปิติโยวิวัจจันตุสัพพะโรโควินาศตุมาเตภวัตวันตรายโยสุขีติกายุโกภวะอาภิวาทนาสิลิสนิจังวุธาปจายโนจัตตารโอธรรมวัฏันติอายุวันโนสุขังปะลังบวัตตุสัพพมังกลังรักขันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพพุทธานุภาเวนะสัพพธัมมานุภาเวนะสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนะสัทธาโสติภวันตุเต
Once again, thank you, Tan Ajahn Kalyano. Brothers and sisters in the Dharma, before we leave, let us put our palms together and say big three sadhus to Ajahn. Okay, let's do it together, shall we? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And also let's bow towards Tan Ajahn. Thank you, Tan Ajahn. So for everyone who are unfamiliar with YBAM, we have our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So do follow us if you would like to know more about other Dharma talks or other events, as Vesak Day is coming soon. So I'm sure that there are many, many good events for everyone. Once again, thank you everybody for joining today's session. Tuki Hantu. Take care, and may all beings be well and happy.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Sekya